Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining a little bit early. Unfortunately, we can't interact with you, so just kind of hang out, watch us for a few minutes before we start. Give everyone a couple more minutes to join. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Rollin, Bud. All right. It's like people are still joining. We'll give them another minute or so. Thanks, Randy. I love that you guys are finding the buttons already. Everyone that's starting to join, we can't interact with you, so just hang tight for a few minutes while we let people join. Give it one more minute. Thanks, Tim. I love this.
All right, Linda.
Starting early. All right, I know we still have people coming in, but that's all right. I'm gonna go ahead and kick it off. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kristen, and I'm a consultant with Harbor Networks. Just want to take a minute to note a few things before we get started. As I mentioned, unfortunately, we're unable to interact with you. Your mics and cameras are turned off. But if you look to the top of your screen, you'll see a smiley face. If everyone could go ahead and click that and send an emoticon along, just like some others have already, just so we know you guys can interact with us and hear us. There we go. Awesome. Keep them coming. Feel free to use them throughout the presentation so we know that you're still with us. Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you, gals. And next to that smiley face, you'll see a box with a question mark. Please use this to submit questions. We'll try and get to them as they come in. Worst case, we'll hit them at the end. And if we, for some reason, can't get to them, we'll catch up with you all after. But please feel free to send them in. I'll interrupt John and Tyler as we're going along to ask the questions just to make sure they're on pace with everything that we're talking about. At the end of the webinar, there is a 4-question survey that'll pop up on your screen automatically. We would appreciate your feedback. It's just clicking a couple buttons. You don't have to type out anything. And this and our other cybersecurity webinars are posted to our website after with a recording. So you feel free to check those out, www.harbernetworks.com, and those are under the resources tab. And now that I have logistics out of the way, I would like to introduce Tyler Wrightson, founder of Leet Cybersecurity, and John Flory, our CISO here at Harbor Networks.
Hey, awesome. Thank you, Kristen. And Kristen puts these together, so she's the glue. She does a great job, and I know I appreciate it very much. I'm really excited about today, right? I've got a colleague, a 20-year relationship with Mr. Tyler Wrightson, and we've been breaking in and playing the offensive security game for many, many years together. And I'm excited about Leet, right? So at Harbor, our security program is awesome because what we do is we manage and procure security programs. We bring the best of class, the best in the world of what they do into our programs. And for offensive security, which really equals proactive security, it's important because it's a game changer. We're being attacked. We're like we've never seen. We're being extorted. And this Tyler has some awesome concepts. And what they do is they help us stay ahead. They help us to at least understand the tactics that are being used and what's going on out there. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Tyler talk for a few minutes, open up, give us a lay of the land. And then I'm going to go into some questions and just basically pepper questions to the hacker. That's what today is about. So Tyler, take it away, man.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. All right. Thanks again. Let's get this party started. So first, I'll introduce myself. I'll give you my background. I'm the founder of Leet Cybersecurity, which is based out of upstate New York. We do work all across the country, even a little bit internationally. And ultimately, we only do one thing, and that is we help our clients secure themselves from hackers and cyber criminals. And we do that exclusively by hacking into them, finding the weaknesses that hackers would exploit by mimicking hackers. And that's really it. We provide guidance on how to fix those issues, but we don't actually fix those issues. And I think that's a really important point about how we approach security, right? We are just mimicking the hackers, and we don't actually sell any of the solutions to fix those issues. Myself, I've been in cybersecurity for a little over 20 years now. Professionally, I've written these two books on the topic, one on wireless network security and the other on hacking and offensive security, essentially how to hack into any organization. More important, though, I think, than my professional experience is the fact that I eat, sleep, and breathe security. It very much is what I love. It is my obsession. I really have been doing this for a long time. It's what I love. So normally during my talks, I love instant feedback. I like people to interrupt me and ask questions, and for us to go off on tangents. So there's a little bit of a nuance here. We can't do that live. However, Kristen is watching the chat. So if you have any questions as we're going through this, please send them in the chat. And then you'll see 10, 15 minutes into this, we're going to pause for questions, and then John's going to take over too and ask some questions. But please, utilize the time, the fact that we're live here, and any questions that you have, I'd be happy to answer. So a little bit about who I think the audience is. It's some of my fellow nerds, some of my high-level security nerds. So I heard there was a good amount of chief security officers, information security officers, that ilk on here. So I'm very happy about that. I honestly think that that's where real security changes happen. And so most of this content has really been geared towards that audience. So if you're a little bit lower level, network admin, security analyst, that type, I think there's some good stuff in here for you too, but I've really geared this towards CISOs and that type. Likewise, if you don't really have a security background, those people I find always join these types of talks. I think that you'll get a lot out of this as well. So even if you're a CFO, CEO, COO, that type of thing, I still think that you'll get a lot of value out of what we're going to talk about here today. So first, why are you here? What are we hoping to accomplish? And it really is just one key point today, and that is to give you a little look into how hackers target organizations, how they approach hacking into organizations from a high level, and how you can utilize that to make yourselves more secure. So as I was starting to develop this specific talk, I realized that I was digging up all these very, very interesting rabbit holes that we can go down together in the future. So I'm hoping that this turns into something we do on a somewhat regular basis. So, be on the lookout for additional things from Kristen and John.
Absolutely.
But again, today we're going to stay relatively high level. And in those future talks, I really hope that we go down into some of the weeds and talk about real specific, tactics from hackers and specific methods. So first, I always like to really reiterate the unique perspective that we have at Leet, because all we do day in and day out, we've done this for over a decade. I started Leet technically about 11 years ago. And all we do day in and day out is hack into organizations, right? That's it. So we have a very, very unique perspective as to the things that cause us headaches as attackers, right? The things that slow us down, and the things that defenders are doing well. And so it's that perspective that I always like to bring to these talks, and I hope you see the value in that perspective. So the key thing here, right? The one high level point that I hope you walk away with is understanding that defenders see your environment. They see you as a target differently than you see your own environment, right? They just look at it from a different perspective. And so the key here is to understand when I say different, I don't mean that attackers are better than you. I definitely don't mean they're smarter. In fact, in a lot of cases, I think that they are not smarter than defenders. They just look at your environment differently than you do. And so I really want you to embrace this idea, right? Just follow along with me to the end of the talk. But embrace the idea that attackers look at you differently than you look at yourself. Even if you have a more complete picture than attackers, they look at it differently. And the key here is that it is very much in your best interest to focus on the attacker's view. So this very simple Venn diagram, this relatively ugly Venn diagram, kind of illustrates the point, right? So on the right-hand side, you have your perspective of your environment, right? And there's a little bit of overlap, right? You already innately have some perspective of what the attacker will see in your environment, right? You understand your technical systems, you understand the things that you likely care about, the assets that you value. But the problem is that if you don't have the attacker's view, that's where you get into trouble, right? And the interesting thing here is that, and I love this quote, quick tangent, right? So this is a quote from Mark Twain, one of those quotes that's tough to attribute to a specific event, but ultimately he said something like, what gets us into trouble is not what we don't know, it's just what we know for sure that just ain't so. So you make a lot of assumptions about the controls you have in place in your organization, the things an attacker might go after in their approach, and it's those things that just aren't true that really get you into trouble. And so again, the key here, right, is you already have your perspective of your organization, and you can't really get into trouble with that, even if that's inaccurate, right? The key here is if you focus on the way the attacker sees your environment and the actual approach they'll take if they want to target you and hack into your environment, steal the things that you care about. If you only had that perspective, you would actually be in a far better spot, right? And again, this is the idea I want you to embrace. That if you set aside your perspective of your environment, you just said, hey, the perspective that matters here in securing us is understanding how the attacker perceives us, how they perceive our environments, how they perceive our controls, how they identify our security controls. That's where you can make meaningful security changes to your environment. And it's funny, another good quote here that actually makes sense from a cybersecurity perspective is that the best defense is a good offense. And so the irony here is not necessarily that you can take an offensive approach to the attackers, but you can take an offensive approach to your environment, right? You can say, hey, look, rather than just focusing on do we have the right defenses, right? And understanding our defenses, what we're going to do is actually attack ourselves and figure out, can we really hold up against a real world attacker? And what do we look like from that perspective? And so I always like to use this very simple analogy, right? If you were trying to secure your home, right? And you've got the ADT salesperson coming in and saying, hey, we just set you up with your home security system. You're looking good. You're all set. Take care. Would you rather have their perspective? Or would you rather have a seasoned criminal that came in and said, you know what? You've got your home security system. I tried breaking in. There's no weaknesses that I can take advantage of. I can't break into your house. Or what happens a lot of times is, you have somebody come in and you say, yeah, I know you've got your security system in place, but here are the weaknesses we found where, the ADT guy kind of missed the mark, or that they kind of neglected the way we really operate as criminals. And again, that's the key difference here, right? Most organizations tend to focus on the defender's perspective, and they almost completely forget that there's a whole nother side of this equation, and they fail to account for what a real hacker, a real criminal would do. And so that's my simple analogy. I'll use this example to apply it to real world cybersecurity. So we had a client that this type of thing happens all the time. We had a client where we were performing a red team. Essentially, we were mimicking hackers. We went through, we set up the phishing campaign and phished some of their people. They thought they would be secure, that their email would be secure because they had set up multi-factor authentication. And I love multi-factor authentication, right? This is a tangent we could go off on another time. I think it's one of those controls that everyone should have in place. And it does make a very, very meaningful impact to security. It makes our jobs as criminals, as hackers, a lot more difficult. However, that part of the email system where they had deployed MFA was good. But once we started getting credentials from our phishing campaign, we just looked for other areas where they had neglected to ensure that multi-factor was enforced. And one of those being something called Exchange Web Connect. And basically what we were able to do is just set up another email client, tell it to use this protocol rather than logging in through the web interface. And we were not prompted for multi-factor authentication. And so again, this is exactly what a real-world criminal would do. They'd say, okay, we can't log into this system with multi-factor. We only have the single form of authentication, their username and password. Let me go find where else this might work. And that's kind of a quintessential approach that attackers take. So again, if you look at it from this perspective, right, to go back to this and say you have your perspective of your environment and the security controls you have in place, but the attacker has their own perspective and their own approach. This is exacerbated by a few key things. And I have another talk from years and years and years ago where I kind of lay out why things are so bad from a security perspective. But a few of the key points really boil down to these things. Why it's so important, why the attacker's perspective is frankly in many ways more important than your own perspective of your network. And that is that this does not exist. I'll give you a second, see if you remember what or know what MAD is. So MAD in this context is mutually assured destruction. And this applies to real world warfare, right? And frankly, even real world criminality, right? So in mutually assured destruction, right, the reason why we're not going to use, nukes against, I'm going to invent something, nukes against China is because China's going to use nukes against us. And so, real world, simple criminal exercise, right, like robbing a convenience store, right, there's some risk the attacker takes on, right? When they show up to a convenience store with a gun to rob the convenience store, they're putting themselves at risk, right? The clerk behind the counter could have a gun. They could fire back. And the challenge here in cybersecurity is that literally just does not exist, right? You cannot actually retaliate against attackers, especially just as businesses, right? So to a certain degree, that exists with nation states, right? So if China hacks us, we can hack China back. But as a business, there's no retaliation. The only thing you can do is stop them from hacking into your environment. The only thing you can really do is defend yourself, right? So really think about that, right? During a real world incident, right? If you're getting phished, if somebody compromises a workstation environment, if they're deploying ransomware, the only thing you can do is respond. You cannot actually retaliate. So it's closer to guerrilla warfare, right? Where they're kind of using our size and our position as a disadvantage for ourselves. And I know it's a different type of guerrilla, but I think that this picture is funnier than actual guerrillas. So on that note, right, that you cannot hack back, what can defenders do? And so this is where I wanted to not just focus on, FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and make things difficult for you guys, but I really wanted to give you one solution, one concept about what you can do because you're at such a disadvantage as defenders. And frankly, it really comes down to this, right? It's ruining the return on investment for attackers, right? And one of the core ways you can do that is by slowing the attackers down, right? Making it so that they have to invest more of their time, more energy into getting that reward than your peers. And so again, this is the thing I hope at least this one slide to turn into another talk, maybe another 30-minute talk about how you can really slow down attackers and what that really means from a defensive control perspective. But I also think that there's a joke that you've probably, at least half of you have probably heard that I think is actually a little bit apropos here. So the joke goes something like, there's two guys walking in the woods and they see a bear off in the distance, start running after them. And the one guy, takes the time to put sneakers on and tie his shoelaces. And the other guy goes, "What are you doing? You can't outrun the bear." And the guy goes, "I know, I'm not trying to, I'm just trying to outrun you." And so again, it's a silly joke, but it kind of does apply here, right? It's like, you don't necessarily need to be perfectly secure. That should not be your goal, because it's an impossible goal, right? But what you should do is focus on, am I better in a way than my peers? Because if the attacker, tries to hack into me and they run into issue after issue after issue, eventually they're just going to say, you know what, it's just not even worth my time. I'll just go focus on the weaker target, right? I want to get my return. I want to deploy ransomware. I want to get that payout, and it's just costing me too much time here. I'll just move on, right? I think there's a lot of truth to that. So now, in spirit of the talk, I wanted to focus on some of the key differences into tactically how hackers really do look at your organization differently than you do, right? So you can really start to wrap your arms around this and say, how can you start to approach the security of your own organization and apply the hacker's perspective? So this is a quote. I think it started out as just a tweet, and then he turned it into a blog post from John Lambert, who is over at Microsoft. But it's a really great way. I don't think it summarizes perfectly the entire difference from how defenders approach security and how attackers approach security. But we do see this organization after organization, and that is that defenders think in terms of lists and attackers think in terms of graphs. And what he really means is that defenders are buried in lists. So this is lists of assets, inventory lists, software they have to support, hardware they have to support. When you go and you deploy security controls, right? Most people are doing it in list form. Hey, I've got to deploy endpoint protection against here's all my workstations, right? And you're going to go down the list and you're going to say, okay, how many are left? There's 20% left. Now there's 10% left. Now there's 3% left, right? Attackers just think about it completely different. They're not just thinking in terms of lists. They're saying, okay, if I land in this graph or this map with all of these different things connected in various ways, how do I move from this asset that I now have access to these other things that I really care about, right? And they're looking for those connections. They're not worried about, just did I hit 100% of this list? And again, this is something that we could easily talk about for hours on end, but I think it does help kind of set the stage for one of the ways that attackers think differently. Another way that we see time and time again, just through even conversations with clients, is that defenders tend to unfortunately seek to validate what they believe, right? Rather than exploring how would an attacker actually perceive us, right? So for example, they might say, hey, we just spun up this new cloud infrastructure. We want to make sure it's secure. Can you just scan that? Can you just target that? And we'll say, well, sure, let's make sure we're accomplishing, exactly the goals you want to accomplish and make sure that is secure. However, right off the bat, we're thinking about that kind of in an incomplete way, because an attacker is not just going to scan that environment and say, nope, there's nothing here, let's move on, right? They're looking at how that's connected to the broader perspective of your environment, right? Is there other data out there on some of your other systems that they can utilize to hack those systems, or vice versa, right? Can they find little bits of information on those systems to then target other systems? So again, I included some questions here, which is, hackers tend to ask more exploratory questions. And again, I didn't want to get too fuzzy, too ethereal with some of these things, but there's definitely some truth to this, which is, rather than just validating the controls that defenders have put in place, attackers will ask questions and say, well, given the information that I do have, how can I utilize this information to my advantage? Or how can I utilize these little footholds to move on to more important things? And they don't simply just say, oh, well, you've got this one control, I guess they're secure, let me move on, right? So again, multi-factor, you look back to that one example I already gave. Defenders think, okay, we've deployed the control, let's move on to the next security control and do what's next. But attackers don't just move on and say, well, they've got multi-factor, let's target somebody else. They say, okay, well, if that's in place, what else can I take advantage of? Are there other areas where I can use these things that I already have to my advantage? So again, very important way, very important difference between the way defenders tend to look at security and the way that attackers look at security. Again, just high level, defenders tend to focus on best practices, but this is the key. They fail to actually think about what is that best practice actually meant to do in our context. And again, one of the simplest examples is passwords, right? So we see organizations deploy good password policies all the time, right? Hey, it's got to be 12 characters minimum, uppercase, lowercase, special characters. But then they fail to account for what is a real world attacker going to do if they're trying to manipulate passwords. And so one of the most common things is just simply that end users can still choose very common passwords that fit those criteria that attackers are aware of and will scan for. So again, that we can turn that into another talk another time. But the key here is rather than just focusing on academic security, quote unquote best practices. Start there and then say, okay, given this, what will a hacker still try to do if they want to break into us? That's the key here. All right, so real quick, I just want to talk at a high level about two parts of the threat model that I think are really important, and where some people tend to not understand how a lot of hackers and cyber criminals operate. And the first thing to embrace here is that cyber criminals have the most absurd return on investment, right? So again, the example I typically use is that the common take from armed robbery, I hope this is surprising for some people, is $700, right? So again, the criminal's putting literally their life on the line and hoping that they get more than $700, right? That's absurd. Whereas with modern cyber crime, you have complete anonymity. You're attacking people from across the world. It's very hard to attribute that hack back to you and actually face any repercussions. And your return on investment is huge. You look at some of the actual ransoms paid out for ransomware. It's easily 6 and 7 figures. You literally have instant millionaires from a single ransomware event. I mean, that's nuts. The return on investment for these attackers is just it's mind blowing. So really, rather than focusing on any particular threat actors or threat groups, even defining things like hackers versus cyber criminals versus hacktivists versus all of that, right? Is organizations, defenders tend to forget that attackers really still, all of those fall into two large classes of threats, which is threats that use non-targeted methods. They don't really care who they're hacking. And then other groups that target specific organizations. And what are the real differences there? So first, understanding non-targeted criminals and their methods is key, because this is where a lot of organizations still fall down, right? Everyone is worried about, well, what if we're targeted? But the fact is, you're more likely to be facing these types of threats just based on volume. So again, context aside, right? I don't know the specific businesses that are on the call. You may have some specific context where you say, hey, I know for a fact, I'm dealing with Department of Defense secrets or something, really classified or some high value target where we are definitely being targeted. That aside, you are still absolutely facing all of these methods on a daily basis. So some of the very common methods utilized by threat actors who don't care who they're compromising, right? They're just looking for that easy return on investment. They're doing things like scanning the entire internet, right? The scanning, the spray and pray, right? They're just scanning the internet, finding who's vulnerable to whatever, and they don't care who it is, right? They're going to exploit that organization, try to compromise something, and see if they can get some sort of payout. This exploit du jour, right? This is a concept that not a lot of defenders are familiar with, which is every single month, right? In 2019. There was over 1,500 new vulnerabilities per month from the National Vulnerability Database. That's just vulnerabilities we knew about, right, from the National Vulnerability Database. So do that math real quick. 1,500 every single month, right? So attackers don't need to be terribly sophisticated. They can just say, okay, what's the latest one? Let me scan the internet, see who's vulnerable to this and who hasn't patched immediately. And let me, see what I gain access to. See if I can, deploy ransomware. See if I can compromise them. A lot of these folks don't even care about what the impact is, right? The third bullet, pop and sell. They'll just compromise somebody and then sell that access, right? They're like, hey, I don't even need to worry about what my return on investment can be from the actual organization. I'll sell this to other hackers. I'll just focus on these new vulnerabilities, scanning the internet, seeing who's vulnerable, compromising them, and then I'll turn around and sell that access. And that access can actually be sold for a pretty penny, especially when you're talking about how easy it is to do that on a monthly basis. Then there's the flip side of that, the hackers who say, I'm not even going to worry about trying to compromise organizations. All I'm going to do is talk to other hackers that have done that hard work. I'm going to buy that access from them. And then I'm going to turn around and try to either, extort these people, hold their organization for ransom, deploy something, do whatever they actually want to cause some impact and get some money. And then the last one kind of falls neatly under those two is it's so incredibly easy. Google dorking. I highly recommend everyone take, 30 minutes someday and research not only what Google dorking is, but how easy it is. So basically, it's as simple as there are vulnerabilities that those new vulnerabilities that come up every month, where you can literally find vulnerable targets just from Google. And you, as people find these new vulnerabilities, say, okay, if you want to find people vulnerable to this, here's the Google string you can search for. You find somebody, any matches that come up for this, they're vulnerable. Go ahead and hack them. That's how easy it is. It takes very, very little skill to actually even find some of these vulnerable people. So again, some of their specific tactics, what they're trying to do, are the things that you're all familiar with, right? They don't care who they're deploying ransomware to. Sure, there are targeted instances, of course, but more likely than that, they're just saying, hey, if somebody's vulnerable and I can deploy ransomware, let me see how much money I can get out of them. They may also just be looking to deploy some sort of piece of malicious software so that you become part of a botnet. And now they've got this massive group of global computers, and they can do nefarious things, send spam. They can mine for cryptocurrency, utilizing all that processing power across the internet. Or they can do something as simple as, I'm just going to see who's been compromised and see if I can steal their banking credentials. There's plenty of malicious software, plenty of Trojans that are specifically geared towards stealing specific banking credentials. So the flip side of that, right? And again, I think we can talk about this another time. And I think that this is where most organizations tend to focus, right? Being targeted. But again, that's only part of the problem here. But same thing there, right? They just tend to be a little more focused on what the real impact can be. So they're finding places that specifically care about having things locked up with ransomware. So they might focus on places like doing manufacturing. They might focus on hospitals and people delivering healthcare services, that type of thing. They might be looking to steal intellectual property or focus on, hey, if I get this digital asset, is there somebody else who's willing to pay me for that? And then, of course, where everyone's mind immediately goes with targeted attacks is the most sophisticated, the people with the greatest skills. That's state-sponsored attacks. But again, the point I wanted to illustrate here is that that's only a little sliver of this. And if you're focusing on just that, you're missing out on a lot of the risk that you're already facing with the non-targeted attacks. So normally I include these slides in the very beginning because this helps summarize our approach to security. But this is the thing that I really hope you walk away with, right? Which is a quote from Sun Tzu, which he says, "If you know thyself and know thy enemy, you need not fear the outcome of 100 battles." And ultimately what he's saying is, don't just take your perspective. Don't just understand yourself, from your own perspective, but take your adversary's perspective and how they perceive you and your weaknesses. And that's where you'll get real tangible security. And that, again, that's really truly what I hope you walk away with, which is you should be taking that approach. You should say, great, this is how I believe my network exists, the assets we care about, the security controls we have in place. Let's make sure that we have the adversary's perspective in everything we do. And we understand how they might still try to hack us or circumvent those controls. So that's it. That's everything I had prepared. So now I know John has some questions, and Chris, I don't know if you had any questions come in either.
Yeah,
we did have. Sorry, John. You want me to just go through them quick? There was two questions. One was, can we get a copy of the presentation after? The whole recording will be on our website under that resources tab. And then I believe we were asked about CPEs. Unfortunately, no, there's no CPEs given for this presentation.
We do have a few presentations coming up, though, that are eligible for CPE. So definitely contact Kristen or myself or the rep at Harbor about that, and we can let you know where those are taking place and when. And then, Kristen, there was
sorry, guys. One more that just came in. Can you please explain state-sponsored attacks?
Great. Thank you. Yes. So state-sponsored literally just means essentially either the nation itself is hacking us. So, China, North Korea, Russia, where they're specifically, seeking to either, steal intellectual property, perform espionage, or cause some sort of impact, right? Shutting down a power grid, things like that. Or they're state-sponsored, which is technically not necessarily the nation themselves hacking us, but they're essentially either turning a blind eye to the criminals or providing some level of assistance, right? But where they can technically plead ignorance and say, well, that's not us hacking you, right? That's just somebody coming from China. So that's essentially state-sponsored. And so that was a good question. if you need me to elaborate too, just ask Kristen and all.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. I have so many questions on what you said there. So we're definitely going to continue this. We'll make it a series and we'll open it up because, wow, it's really so important that what you said. And most so in it from an incident response perspective, when I'm out there helping clients when they have incidents and breaches, it's usually non-targeted. They become targeted because there's scans going on and they're vulnerable, so they're put on a list or they're sold, etc., and exactly how to get in them. And you can even buy managed services, pay for performance, managed services for hacking. So that's where we're at. Okay, so these are great questions, and I'm glad we have time for them because I want to hear your answers, Tyler. So probably keep them to a minute or so because I want to buzz through these 1 to 2 minutes. Why you just, so you said, so with Harbor, we work with Leet because they are specialists in what they do. And then we have other teams to help fix it, help remediate, mitigate, etc. Right? So why did you choose this as your life?
Yeah, great. I mean, so there's two simple components. One, it's what I love. I love that side of it, breaking security. And two, I just saw that's where the greatest need was, right? Again, it's kind of the summary of this presentation, which is everyone seems to struggle with what a real world attacker would do if they wanted to hack an organization or bypass the controls they put in place. And we would have that conversation over and over and over about, okay, great, these are the controls you have in place. However, here's what a real world attacker would do and where we should now invest some additional time and resources. So again, it really just comes down to that need. I didn't see anyone else really filling that void.
Excellent. You have any story you want to share real quick? You got a quick one that comes to mind of, hey, this is how I got in, and yeah, what do we got?
Yeah, so actually on that note of people failing to take the attacker's perspective, the one that jumps out, and there's actually this talk was recorded. It was years and years ago at DerbyCon. I presented this, but there was one organization. It was a state agency. When we were defining the list of targeted assets, what they wanted us to hack into, our point of contact hesitated and said the mainframe, and I was like, I asked him about the hesitation. Why are you hesitating? Do you not want us to hack into that? And he basically said, no, it's not that. I just don't think you would ever gain access to it. And I said, okay, let's just leave it at that. Put it on the list. So long story short, after about a week's time, I showed him exactly how we gained access to everything within the mainframe. And again, the key here is not that we were better or smarter than them. It was just that they failed to account for how a real world attacker would attempt to bypass the controls they had put in place. And they thought they had done a great job. And frankly, they had done a very good job. But it's still, there was a path for an attacker, and they didn't have compensating controls to plug those few remaining holes. So again, we could go off on a tangent there about that specific attack path and all that another time, but that story comes to mind.
Yeah, well, this leads right into this. Give it. What's the easiest, quickest? So, hey, time is money. What you said is so important. From that, slow it down. Let them go after. Use some deception technology. Use some, honeypot, canary files, all this type of stuff, right, to slow them down. But what's the easiest way if you had to get into something right now?
It's a good question. I'd say that in general, there's two, maybe three methods. The first one, which most hackers will probably tell you, is social engineering. So utilizing email to trick end users. That's good, but it can also be a little bit noisy, and frankly, there's still almost purely technical ways to get in. So the two remaining ways, other than phishing and targeting end users, is issues with passwords. So the password issues are still completely rampant. I mean, one of the easiest ways, actually, this could turn into its own talk as well. There are breaches like LinkedIn, Adobe, MySpace, right? So anytime you see that those companies have been breached and password databases have been hacked, those things typically end up on the dark web for people to just purchase. And so we've shown in some cases password breaches that are over 5, 6, 7 years old those passwords have still been reused for meaningful things. So we had one state agency where that was the case. It was over 5 years old was the breach, and literally the same passwords that the users had used to register for, I think it was Adobe, worked to log into their email at the state agency. So talk about easy. We don't need to do anything. We literally just download the breach data. The person's email is their work email. Like, so if it was mine, it would be tw@leetsys.com. I'm just going to try other systems, see where that works with that same password, and then we're logged in. And then again, the third one is to just purchase the access. So again, if you want to just go on the dark web and say, hey, I'm looking to purchase credentials to, compromised hospitals or wherever, they're there. You can literally just pay to buy them. So.
And I love, it reminds me of what you said about multi-factor. It's huge, right? You absolutely need it. And if you don't have it in one area, they're going to find it. So that was so good what you said right there, because that's what we're finding is, we've got it here, but there's a data center connection or some application, et cetera. So even though you have multi-factor, if it is not holistic, it's better than nothing, but there's a big hole there. You need it everywhere in the environment.
Yep.
Okay. If you had one piece of advice, what is it? What's the one piece?
I mean, hopefully everyone on the webinar knows at this point, it is where I see most organizations falling down is they fail to take the attacker's perspective, right? Again, so they're looking at it purely defensively and saying, hey, these are the good controls we put in place. We just signed up for an MSSP. We just signed up for endpoint protection. We deployed MFA everywhere. But then they fail to actually say, okay, now hack us, right? Tell us where we're weak. And again, I hope that doesn't come across as a sales pitch for Leet. It's really not meant to be there. The reason why we take this approach is because that's where we see the greatest need, and not vice versa.
No, 100%, right? Controls and tools get beat. It's my biggest. It goes right through me when I hear software providers say, "Just put our agent out there. We're going to see it. Yeah. We're going to get everything." Wow, man, and 0-day attacks, I understand there are technologies to help there, but if you haven't seen it before, how the heck are you going to say you're going to stop it?
Exactly.
Right. There's some you'll stop,
yeah.
But it's really a hoodwink trick.
And John, another element to that, again, which we haven't really discussed here, which we can do in another talk, is even those detective controls, right? So you say, hey, look, we're going to catch it. What does that really mean, right? In so many of these instances where we do a red team, we say, yeah, sure. We're setting off alarms. We were setting off alarms all weekend long, but because you don't have anyone watching it over the weekend or over the holiday, we gained access to everything you care about. So again, it's defense in depth. It's not just detective controls. It's not just preventative controls. It's all these things applied with context to actually make organizations more secure.
And when they attack over the weekend, holiday, 2 a.m., and I've noticed a string of these very recently, and it's interesting to me. Out of office. Be careful with out of office, because the new tactic for these cyber criminals is we methodically take your data over time, and then we choose when we want to set the bomb off, right? And what they're choosing is when the administrator says, I'm going to be out of the office.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's pervasive. Okay. Yeah, what's changed? I just talked about the change in attacks. Old attack is we're going to encrypt you if you have good backups. It's going to be painful, but you're going to be able to recover. New attack is we methodically take your data, then we extort you. What do you see out there on your side?
Oh man, this alone should turn into another talk as well. At the risk of sounding like a fearmonger, it's going to get worse, right? The challenge is any way an attacker, right? They're just criminals. They're looking for a good payday. Any way they can make money easily, they're going to do that. So right now they're focused on affecting the availability of assets with ransomware, right? So they don't really care about compromising those digital assets. They're just saying, hey, we've locked it up, right? You cannot, log into your medical record system. You cannot access your manufacturing system. You cannot access your billing systems, right? And if you want to do that, we'll provide you the key to unlock it. You have to pay us. So that's one way, affecting availability. We're going to see very quickly, they're going to find other ways to monetize that. And they have. They've now started to exfiltrate data and say, well, we're going to sell your data on the dark web. However, what we're going to see is far more specific campaigns, right? So think about some of the data that doesn't have a shelf life. The one that comes to mind, two things come to mind for me. Medical records, right? So if an attacker compromises some, for lack of a better term, compromising medical records, right? So the example I always use is, right, a celebrity, right? If they have details about their medical history, right, like certain diseases they have or anything like that, they could just extort them and say, hey, look, if you want this to go out to the public,
Right.
I'll do that. But if you don't, you got to pay me, monthly for the rest of your life. We're going to see far more targeted and very malicious attacks like that, where they're focused on the confidentiality of some of that data. And then we're going to see them affecting the integrity of data. So the example I always use is hacking into a hospital, gaining access to their pharmaceutical system and saying, you know what, we just reversed all of the uh, uh, allergy information within your system. So unless you want to start killing people by giving them drugs, the wrong drugs, you're going to pay us.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So we haven't really seen that type of thing yet, but we are going to, because it's an easy way to make money with what they are already doing, especially once people start getting wise and coming up with solutions to have answers to availability. Right. So if they say, hey, you've locked us up, you've deployed ransomware, but we have this new, hot site, we've just moved over there, we're no longer worried about you affecting our availability. They're going to say, okay, well, what about integrity and confidentiality?
I'm seeing it. It's definitely here. It's interesting how you said pay us monthly. Wow, predictable recurring revenue model, and what you said about the medical record is so true, right? So if they compromise and they get my credit card, or they get a credit card, you just throw the credit card away, get a new credit card number. But if they get your medical record, that's why it's worth so much, right? There's many reasons, but that's one reason that medical is a big target. What I frightens is what I use. I was thinking of a bunch. I'm like, what scares? I'm like, oh, he's going to say he's not scared. What frightens you though?
No, I mean, honestly, it's those things, right? It is the fact that we are, especially like when you look at how globally, where most of the cyber incidents occur, it's America by far. I mean, absurd. So it does worry me that we're headed in that direction, and we're the ones taking the brunt of that. I am very concerned that we have not. Cybersecurity is so bad in America right now, and we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. It does. It worries me with where we're going, and it does worry me some of those kinetic attacks, right? So Americans kind of saw some of that this summer between the gas pipeline and the meat packing and all of that, right? Real world impact that had complete cyber roots. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we're going to see some unfortunately some pretty terrible things in the future.
I mean, the OT part of this could be a whole talk and a half in itself, right? And it is under attack, and it hasn't been built for security. Our infrastructure, our SCADA, right on. Why are we losing?
It's very, very simple. So again, this could be the first topic we cover next time, because again, I covered this years ago and said exactly this. Why are things so bad? And it's rooted in a couple key things. The primary one just being simple return on investment, right? So again, it's very, very economical for hackers to target us and make a ton of money very, very easily and almost completely anonymously. That's why it's so bad. So again, if we could attack back and they had to worry about the same thing happening back to them, it may be more of a fair fight. But you combine those two things, return on investment, anonymity, and the fact that we can't hack back. I mean, that spells a recipe for where we're at today.
Agreed. All right. Let's talk about tools just a little bit.
Cool.
And we need defensive depth. We need layers. We need to watch them. All this. What are a couple of your favorites?
Yeah. So I'll preface this by saying, again, we have a unique perspective here, and these are the things that trip us up and where we see a lot of value for clients. But we won't help you do any of these things, right? We do not help clients deploy any of these defensive controls, and that is anything related to email security, especially multi-factor authentication. I love multi-factor authentication. There are absolutely at least half a dozen relatively easy ways. Why do I say relatively easy ways to bypass MFA? But when it's in place, it makes it that much less likely that an attacker is going to spend that time to do that and target you. So I love multi-factor. Anything else related to spam and phishing detection, all that stuff. That you get a huge return on investment there as a defender. And I use return on investment somewhat hesitantly because we're talking about security. You don't really measure security with ROI, but I digress. So there's that. I love endpoint detection. That as opposed to antivirus makes a world of difference, especially when there's a third party watching that system. It's very, very difficult for people to bring that stuff in house and watch endpoint protection because it's just you're drinking from a fire hose. So giving that to somebody else who can make intelligent data from that and say, hey, look, amidst all this noise, this workstation looks like it's actively being targeted or compromised. Take it offline, right? That really slows us down big time as attackers. And when organizations have good endpoint protection in place, it's really meaningful.
That's really great advice. And even to expand on the endpoint protection, having that complete visibility, having a SIM, having it watched. What you said is important because they're attacking it. You're sleeping. Okay. So you need people to watch it, right? And to understand and use behavioral analytics on that, but also to get a complete holistic picture. So make sure you're getting your cloud and your endpoint and east-west and watching. And I think that's really good. And I'm going to say, an incident response plan is a tool because if you have that dialed in and you've got that humming, time is everything. And it's a huge difference maker.
Agreed.
A lot of times.
Agreed.
Yeah.
John, it's funny you say that because we talk about that all the time, which is, again, given a real world incident, even if the alarms are going off, that's one thing. Can you respond in a timely manner before we get to the good stuff, before we get to the goal? You know what I mean? That's a key question to answer. So I'll definitely give that a thumbs up.
So what mistakes? Give us a mistake or two you're seeing that all over the place.
So I'll start with the high level one, which again is especially admins. Admins fall into this trap all the time of failing to look at their environment from the attacker's perspective. And they get stuck in academic arguments about, well, our end users will always be a problem. They'll always be a vulnerability for us. We can't ever stop an end user from clicking a link. So that actually as well could turn into its own webinar. I hate that argument. I hate hearing admins say, well, we'll never stop an end user from clicking a link. It's like, yes, I agree with you. However, if there's a path for an attacker to send a link to an end user and within a short period of time get domain admin and compromise everything you care about, it sounds like you're doing something wrong, right? It sounds like there's some technical controls missing there. So there's that mindset there that I think is difficult. And just at a high level, I think admins again still fail to look at their organization from paths, right? What paths exist to those assets that we really care about, and it seems like one of the absolute most common thing for technical and network admins is related to passwords. So they'll put all of the issue on end users. Say, well, end users choose bad passwords. Not only do I still see technical admins choose horrible passwords, but I see them falling into bad practices because they have their own challenges. I get it, but password reuse on technical administration systems is rampant and a very, very big deal because again, as an attacker, if we compromise one system and we get one set of administrative credentials, one of the first things we do is test it everywhere else. Where else can we log in with these credentials? Where else were these reused? And we easily gain access to things that we shouldn't be able to that way.
Really good answer. Oh, I think yeah, we did that. Oh yeah, no, I didn't get that. So I'm going back and forth here. Give me a couple tools. You got to take some tools off the shelf. What are you taking to get in?
Honestly, between some of the major hacking tools out there like Metasploit and vulnerability scanners and stuff like that, I like good old customized phishing websites. You register a good domain for $10, throw up a free website, and you get that in front of end users, and all you need them to do is log into it. That's not going away for a long time. So I'd say that's up there.
Any security sales tactics bother you? You hear security companies saying this to people, and you're like, "Oh man, is there
Yeah.
anything you want to talk about there?"
I'd say maybe two things. I hate when I see free assessments. And look, I think I've even offered potentially some free assessments.
Yeah,
We did a free if we fail campaign, but I hate free assessments that are specifically geared towards only finding specific common weaknesses, so that they can then turn around and sell them a specific product. That paired with a lot
yeah,
of like FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That tends to annoy me. Whereas again, if the context was just subtly different, they said, "Hey, look, let's find all of your real world weaknesses. Let's find how an attacker would try to break into your organization, and then come up with controls to fix those." That's the approach that we take, and I think that's way more of a fair, balanced approach.
agreed. And we're going to end with this one, then we'll make a statement and let Kristen come back in. I wanted to ask you this: what about the regs? More coming down the pike, in your opinion? And do you like them or do you not like them?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just like any other law. I think that there is absolutely a lot of value to them, but they're tricky. Some of the things I've heard being proposed about, like breach notification within 24 hours, which is just absurd.
yeah.
There's no way you can. That's not tenable in any way. But if nothing else, right, taking this and turning it into something that now is in front of everybody because it's the law, that opens up people's eyes to, oh, maybe this is more important than I realized. Maybe this is more rampant. Maybe hacking and cybercrime is more rampant than I realized, and we need to care about this. I think there's a lot of value in that for sure.
Awesome. And Tyler, thanks so much. And we're
Of course.
definitely going to continue this. We work together every day. Definitely contact us if you would like to engage Lee and just have a conversation. And something that's really great is we just put out some bundles we're going to be releasing for fourth quarter, and they're really awesome to get people's hygiene, and Leet's part of it. So it's really cool. So Kristen, I don't know if we had a couple of questions or how you want to finish us off, but it's your show.
Hey, no, I think we went through all the questions. Again, just a reminder, if you need to access this, the whole recording will be on our website, www.harbornetworks.com, on the resources tab. Please feel free to reach out to any of us with questions. And there's a quick survey, I promise. As soon as I end this, it'll pop up on your screen. Please take 2 minutes to fill it out. We would really appreciate it. And I think that's all.
Really awesome. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
Awesome. Thanks,
Have a great
everyone.
day.
Appreciate it.